We have our next speaker with us, Mr. Yves Poppe, Program Director at Advanced Intercontinental Supercomputing, National Supercomputing Center, Singapore, NSCC. Speaking on today's topic, Oman's great potential as global R&E networking hub. Over to you, Mr. Yves.
Thank you very much, Melvin. Great pleasure to be here. Of course, it would be even a greater pleasure to be all together in Oman, but that will be for next time. I'm Yves Poppe with the NSCC in Singapore. I'm looking at things from a supercomputing perspective after having looked at it from a telecom perspective from most of my career. So it's a different point of view, and I would like to share with you the idea of Oman as a global R&E networking hub. In fact, an idea which we already started developing 10 years ago. And I'm impressed by the progress made by Oman, both on the research and education network and from a global networking perspective in general, thanks to Omantel and Omren in particular. So the question still is, why do we need dedicated research and education networks? Every 5 years, especially when funding has to be renewed, the question comes, why do we need research and education networks? And it's a good exercise because we have to reinvent ourselves constantly. So one of the major elements is, of course, the sharing of instruments. We're thinking of CERN, for example, in the high energy physics. We're thinking of astronomy, where you have projects now like SKA, the Square Kilometer Array, where you have projects like the LSST in South America, projects like ITER, the fusion, projects like IceCat on the north, and all these instruments are very expensive, have to be shared, very important to be shared, and to be cost effective, have to be used by many people, some of them competing for things all the way to Nobel Prizes. And of course, we need high transmission capacity because all these advanced research projects generate lots and lots of data. So we have to harness also the potential of supercomputing and storage, because obviously all the data needs to be computed and needs to be stored. We have to locate these instruments at optimal places for observation, like in astronomy. And also, more and more for supercomputers in particular, we have to locate them in the most economical and eco-friendly places. And the energy sources are very important. And as you know, there is quite an international competition now to locate supercomputers and to locate data centers. Most countries will bend over backwards to attract the hyperscalers. And of course, you need the telecom part. Now, we have to accelerate collaboration, as we said, astronomy, nuclear physics, material sciences, genomics, more and more. We're all talking about personalized medicine, meteorology, more and more active, especially with global warming. And by the way, meteorology has a lot of funding these days and are a major consumer of the major supercomputers. And obviously, we have some grand challenges, such as COVID-19. In fact, COVID-19 has been an interesting exercise, has been mentioned by a number of speakers. And it will probably not be the last pandemic, but I think we're prepared for the next one. Climate change, I think, will be a major topic going forward. And of course, the quest for sustainable growth. So this being said, we've developed in recent years a global research and education network which is much more efficient and faster than before. The map here shows us the connectivity at 100 gig. In fact, it's relatively recent because the first 100 gig international R&D connection was between Europe and America for the Terina conference in 2013 in the Netherlands. And since then, everything has expanded quite dramatically. And in fact, one of the reasons things have expanded is the affordability, because not many research and education networks can afford to go and have that kind of connectivity all alone. And that's where we have the ANA collaboration, CAE, between Europe and Asia, and APR between Asia and American West Coast. No, the result of all of that is that we have now a resilient 100 gigabit per second RNA ring around the world, which was in fact the dream of my boss, Professor Tantinui at NSCC, who had a vision of a resilient 100 gig ring around the world. In fact, we started in Singapore with 100 gig to the USA. Back, we demonstrated it at the Supercomputing 2014, and now it has become a reality, especially with the completion of the connectivity between Singapore and the coast in Saudi Arabia. It's thanks to them that we have completed that resiliency. And the other part is the shared connection between Singapore and the European Union. One thing we have to watch going forward is the evolution of spectrum owned by the R&E community, and even fiber pairs owned by the R&E community. In fact, the biggest thing we have seen recently is the planned connectivity between Finland, Norway, and Japan on the other side, and also the American West Coast through the Arctic Connect cable. There, the Finnish government has a fiber pair, financed the fiber pair, which will be very interesting. The Europeans, with the Géant, they are financing, helping to finance the Bella project to connect to Brazil. ARNet, they have shared capacity on the Indigo cable between Perth and Singapore. South Africa is moving, so things are progressing. One thing is we have to share the resources and we have to share the cost. And here we have put that in practice with the Asia-Pacific Ring, where we have a number of members who have facilities, and the goal is to have mutual backup, mutual transit, and mutual overflow. Same on the European side. A long time, 100 gig between Europe and Asia was just too expensive, and prices, of course, have gone down considerably in recent years, and that has allowed us to have the CAE, the Asia-Europe connectivity, which was put in place in June 2019. Other evolution is in the acquisition of capacity. Most of these 100 gigs now are based on 10-year or 15-year IRUs, indivisible right of use. So basically, what that means is you have a higher upfront cost, but your overall operating cost over the period of 10 or 15 years is much, much lower. If we look at it from an Oman perspective, as Salim Al-Amri of Omren said in his speech earlier, from an Oman perspective, he sees ASREN, he sees APAN, he sees Internet 2, and he sees Géant. And if one looks at the connectivity of Oman, the two poles are the Netherlands with their connectivity to Netherlight, and on the other hand, the connectivity to Singapore. And from there, they really can reach the whole R&E world. So the Netherlight collectors are listed here, and obviously the connectivity to all European countries and European research networks is important. And from there also, from Netherlight, the connectivity to North America. If we look at it from Eastern perspective, SINGAREN with the SINGAREN Open Exchange is key. SINGAREN is the Singapore Research and Education Network. And if we see at it on the next slide, which I just received, the update, you see Omren, of course. There's a 1 gigabit connection between Omren and Singapore, and we are very happy to see Omren. The other Middle East connectivity we have is Coast. Coast in January introduced 2 times 100 gig connected to Singapore, and at the same time he also introduced 2 times 100 gig to Europe, to Netherlight, in fact. And obviously here things evolve. The TAIN network, which is co-funded with the Europeans and essentially covers the ASEAN countries, will be upgraded to 100 gig connectivity. And then we also have built an SOA2 to have redundancy. And from there, we'll have a 100 gig connection to Guam. And Guam is also poised to become a major R&E exchange point. So if we look at it again from a Oman perspective, Oman has a regional reach. Again, the reach is based on the number of international cables you have, most of it subsea cables, and Oman is very well covering the region. And again, congratulations to the progress over the last 10 years. And again, if you look at a broader perspective, from Oman, you have now a global reach thanks to the growing number of cables. And if you extrapolate even further, Oman is a natural place to connect east, west, north, and south. In fact, in the old days, Oman was already the transit point between the Far East and Europe. And in these days of telecom, why should it not be? Now, if one look at it from a telecom point of view, there are basically a number of places, a limited number of places in the region which can meet the criteria to become a hub for communication in general and for R&E in particular, and that's the number of cable landings. There, Oman obviously has an excellent position. So does the United Arab Emirates with Fujairah especially, Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, Alexandria in Egypt, and Djibouti, which is on the other side of the Red Sea, but has also made enormous progress over the last 10 years in international cable capacity. So if we look at it, Omren really has the possibility to connect to everyone. And what I would see is regional connectivity, because I had the pleasure to present at the Middle East Special Interest Group in Muscat in November 2010. That was the Middle East Special Interest Group is organized by Internet 2. And in fact, I saw that my friend John Chapman, who was with Qatar Foundation at the time, CEO of Georgetown University, he is still chairing that group. And the vision at the time, which I found in the old presentation, showed in fact a regional network within the peninsula, which we called at the time tentatively Al-Khwarizmi. And it still work in the progress. Now, interesting to see at the time, what I had on that slide was Fujairah, Jeddah, and Alexandria. In fact, Oman, 10 years ago, was not a potential place for an R&E hub. It is today. And Djibouti was not on the map 10 years ago, they are today. So what I still hope is to see better connectivity within the region, between all the regional R&E networks. Now, every R&E network in the region looks to Europe, looks to Asia, and do not look to each other. So even if there's not much common research in the region, one can say, okay, if I have a baseline I share with my neighbor, and together we then share a high capacity to Europe or to Asia, or later on to Africa, we have, instead of 1 gig, we have 10 or 100 gig cost shared. And again, providing each other mutual transit, mutual backup, and mutual overflow. Now, one of the reasons these things are not evolving that fast is the cost. In fact, Helga Spitaler was referring to the cost issues. The cost issue is still there. And if one looks at some statistics of the price of international capacity, like the ones published by Telegeography, for example, prices in the region are still way too high compared to most of the rest of the world. It's not only a problem in the Middle East, it's also a problem in some of ASEAN countries where the prices are still too high. So it is time to have that. We have been saying that for a number of years. Of course, carriers will have arguments why prices remain high. But still, if these arguments, you can argue if they're valid or not. But what I would say is there has to be a collaboration between the carriers and the research and education. So the Minister of Education has to talk to the Minister of Communication, if needed, to get a special pricing, if needed, for the R&E sector, because we all need to connect at much higher speeds. And as we have seen, we need collaboration. And that will basically finish my presentation. Once I have supplementary slides, I do not know if the presentation will be shared, but again, we have new connectivity coming out of Oman to Europe and to Asia, and one in particular, which I like, is the new cable, which is the OAC, so the Oman to Australia cable. And that Oman to Australia cable will be very important because of the SKA, the square kilometer array, which will generate loads and loads of capacity. Talking about Australia, and here I will stop, the submarine cables are not only for telecom, but there's a project to transmit power between Australia and Singapore. And again, it would have a 120 square kilometer of solar arrays and a 10 gigawatt plant. So again, this has potential. And here I will really close because cable and power is another topic. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yves, for the presentation. And yes, hope to meet you soon next year for the event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.